The silver business card lay on the wooden table between Charlotte and Mia, a tiny object that held the weight of a dangerous new world. In that moment, the boundary between them seemed to dissolve. There was no longer the pragmatic mother and the imaginative daughter, no longer skepticism versus hurt. There were only two trapped women, united by the same chilling fear. Silence enveloped them, but for the first time, it wasn't the silence of distance, but of an alliance forged in desperation. "A scorpion," Charlotte whispered, her voice hoarse. "The scorpion cult. It was in the book." No more explanation was needed. Mia understood. The terror in her eyes was replaced by a sharp, intense focus. "What do they want with us? With this house?" "I don't know," Charlotte admitted, and the confession of not knowing was, in itself, an act of trust. "That man, he said your father was holding items for Julian." They retreated to the kitchen, where the bright lighting felt safer than the shadows of the living room. Charlotte laid everything out on the marble island, turning the perfect surface into a chaotic war room. Ethan's black leather ledger, the old photo of Ethan and Julian, the local history book, the scorpion business card. For the first time, they examined the fragments of Ethan's secret life together. Charlotte showed Mia the debts, the coded names, the ominous entry about Julian. Mia, in turn, described what she'd seen in more detail. Not just the video of the crash, but fragmented dreams of arguments in her father's office, of hushed late-night phone calls, and of a hunted look that had clung to her father in his final months. "I think he knew he was in trouble," Mia said, her voice certain. "I think he was scared. Maybe that's why he's still here, to warn us." Charlotte looked at her daughter with a newfound respect. Mia wasn't a fragile child lost in delusion. She was strong. She possessed a sensitivity that she, in all her pragmatism, lacked. "Maybe you're right," Charlotte said softly. They sat there for hours, piecing together clues, spinning theories. Were the items Julian wanted related to the old cult? Had Ethan found something on this land, something he believed could solve his financial problems, but which had instead led him into a fatal trap? Their conversation, for all its terrifying subject matter, had an intimacy they hadn't shared in years. They were a team. But the house, it seemed, did not approve of this unity. As evening fell, the atmosphere inside began to curdle. The familiar cold returned, but this time it felt different. It was no longer tinged with Ethan's sadness and regret. It was malicious, sharper. It began with the sounds, not the heavy footstep or the moving object, but whispers. They seemed to come from all directions, from the air vents, from the dark corners of the room, from just over their shoulders. And they were not in Ethan's voice. There were multiple voices, sibilant and venomous. Charlotte, making tea in the kitchen, heard a syrupy, conspiratorial hiss. "He never loved you. You were just part of the set dressing. The beautiful wife in the beautiful house." She dropped the kettle with a clatter, hot water splashing across the floor. She spun around wildly. No one was there. Mia, trying to do homework in her room, heard another voice, scratchy and mocking. "Your mother thinks you're crazy. She's going to have you committed, locked away." She clapped her hands over her ears, but the words seemed to echo from inside her own skull. Then came the visual flickers, not the familiar silhouette of Ethan. Charlotte, passing a hallway mirror, caught a glimpse of a face that was not her own reflected back. A pale, gaunt face with hollowed-out eyes. Mia, looking out her bedroom window, saw something small and hunched skitter across the edge of the woods before vanishing into the darkness. The attacks grew more personal. A framed family photo on the mantelpiece, the only one where all three of them looked genuinely happy on a vacation in Maine, was found smashed on the floor. No sound. It was simply there, broken. Charlotte found a pearl necklace her mother had given her, something she kept carefully in her jewelry box, lying in the kitchen sink, covered in coffee grounds. It was Mia who articulated it first. She came running downstairs, her face pale with fright, and found Charlotte numbly cleaning the necklace. "That's not Dad," Mia whispered, her voice trembling. "What's happening? It's not him. It's something else, or something's else." The truth of her words was undeniable. Ethan's presence, however frightening, had felt purposeful, a warning, an attempt to protect. This was malevolent. It found their deepest insecurities and whispered them aloud. It attacked their memories, their symbols of happiness. It wasn't trying to warn them. It was trying to break them, to drive them apart. Faced with this new, intangible, and vicious enemy, Charlotte's pragmatism roared back to life. She could, just barely, accept the idea of her husband's spirit trying to communicate, but mocking voices and hunched-over phantoms, that was a bridge too far. There had to be a rational explanation. Old houses have drafts that make sounds. Stress and grief can cause mass hallucinations. And above all, she was worried about Mia. The girl was bearing the brunt of these phenomena. Charlotte could see the exhaustion in her daughter's eyes, the way she flinched at every sound. A mother's love, an instinct more powerful than any fear of the supernatural, took over. She had to do something. She couldn't call an exorcist, but she could call a doctor. The next morning, she lied. "I have an appointment in town," she told Mia as casually as she could. "I'll be back before you get home from school." In reality, she had booked a consultation with Dr. Aris Thorne, a renowned child and adolescent psychologist in Stamford who specialized in trauma and acute anxiety disorders. She had found him online, his credentials perfect, his articles logical. He was a man of science, of reason. He was the antidote to this madness. She told Mia that afternoon that they had an appointment. The betrayal on Mia's face was a physical blow. "A shrink? You think I'm crazy?" "I think you've been through a horrific trauma and you need to talk to a professional," Charlotte said, her voice firm. "I'll be talking with him too. We'll do it together." Dr. Thorne's office was the antithesis of their house. It was bright, modern, and sterile. Everything was beige and soft gray. There were no dark corners or whispers. Dr. Thorne himself was a calm man with a neatly trimmed beard and a well-practiced, empathetic smile. He listened patiently. Charlotte explained Ethan's sudden death, the financial stresses they were under. Then, hesitantly, she described Mia's anxiety, the nightmares, the feeling of being watched. Then it was Mia's turn. At first, she refused to speak, but at Thorne's gentle prodding and her mother's pleading gaze, she began. She told him about the video, the rattling door, the voices. She told her story flatly, without embellishment, like a witness reporting a crime. When she finished, Dr. Thorne nodded sagely. "Thank you for sharing that, Mia. That took a great deal of courage." He turned to Charlotte. "What Mia is experiencing is a very classic response to acute trauma. The sudden, violent death of a parent can have profound psychological consequences." He went on to explain. The visual and auditory hallucinations were projections of survivors' guilt and fear. The video of the crash was Mia's brain trying to process and create a narrative for an incomprehensible event. The whispering voices were manifestations of her own internalized anxiety. Essentially, he concluded, Mia's mind is creating these ghosts because it's sometimes easier to face a supernatural foe than the raw, mundane, and painful truth of loss. Charlotte felt a wave of relief. See? There was an explanation. Rational, scientific, manageable. But Mia looked as if she had been slapped. "You don't believe me," she said, her voice flat. "Oh, I believe you feel these things are real, Mia," Thorne said patronizingly. "Your feelings are absolutely valid, but we must learn to distinguish between our feelings and objective reality." He smiled at Charlotte. "I recommend we begin weekly sessions, and perhaps we can look at a low-dose anti-anxiety medication to help stabilize Mia's moods and allow her to get some restorative sleep." That was it, the word medication. To Mia, it was confirmation of her worst fear. Her mother didn't just think she was crazy. She wanted to drug her into silence, to make her problem disappear. The car ride home was a heavy, glacial silence. The fragile bridge they had built the day before was utterly demolished. When they got home, Mia went straight to her room and slammed the door. Charlotte stood alone in the grand foyer, feeling hollow. She had tried to do the right, sensible thing, and in doing so had pushed her daughter further away than ever before. The venomous voices had won. In her lonely fortress, Mia felt a dark despair. No one believed her. Her mother, the one person in the world she thought would have her back, had betrayed her. She curled into a ball on her bed, trying to choke back angry tears. And of course, the voices returned, more vicious than ever. "See? She thinks you're a burden. They're going to send you away to a place for girls like you. Alone. You're all alone. Go away," she screamed into the quiet of her room. "Leave me alone." She scrambled up, desperate for something to drown them out. She plugged in her headphones, blasting music, but the whispers still snaked through. She turned on an old digital radio on her desk, scrolling through the frequencies, seeking only the hiss of static, a wall of white noise to fill her head. She found an empty frequency and cranked the volume. The steady shh of static filled the room, a chaotic but comforting sound. She lay back down, closed her eyes, and focused on the white noise. Slowly, it worked. The whispering voices faded, drowned out by the chaos. She felt herself begin to relax. But then something in the static changed. It was no longer random. A pattern began to emerge. The hiss started to pulse, to ebb and flow in a strange rhythm, almost like breathing. Mia's eyes snapped open. She sat up in bed, staring at the radio, and then, through the static, a voice spoke. It was not one of the mocking whispers. It was not Ethan's voice. This voice was different. It was ancient, cold, and devoid of all human emotion. It was perfectly clear, as if the speaker were standing in the room. It spoke, not to her, but into her. "The girl who sees," the cold voice rasped from the radio speaker. "We see you too. The house chose him, and now it chooses you." There was a pause, and Mia felt her heart stop. The voice spoke again, closer this time, more intimate, and 1,000 times more terrifying. "You belong to this place. You belong to us." Mia screamed, a real scream this time, a raw, unrestrained shriek of pure horror. She ripped off her headphones, scrambling back on her bed until her back hit the wall. She stared at the old radio, from which a voice from hell had just laid claim to her soul. She was utterly, completely alone, trapped in a house that wasn't just haunted, but was alive and hungry. The threat of Julian and his creditors seemed distant, almost trivial, compared to this intimate, horrific violation. The entities in the house were no longer just tormenting, they were claiming.